G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm David and today we're going back to basics. I got asked on TikTok a while ago about what I would do if I was just starting out in bonsai and sort of how to get started. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. So the first thing I look for is a tree that will grow really well in my area. This tree is a Callistemon viminalis. We do actually have them growing wild in our area, so I know they're happy in my climate. This particular type of tree loves water. So I bought this tree probably 2 or 3 months ago now. It looked pretty much the same as it does now. But I brought it home, sat it in a tub of water, just a little tray, just to make sure it had plenty of water, because it is probably a little bit root bound in this pot. I was meant to do this video a couple of months ago, but never got around to it. But anyway, it's a $20 tree that I bought from Bunnings. Beautiful flowers, and once we've got a nice dense foliage canopy on our tree, you'll find you'll have a nice dense covering of those flowers when it comes into flower in spring. It's quite a nice looking tree. So for anybody wanting to do this, that would be my first port of call would be to look for some local species that grow really well, have smallish leaves. These have fairly small leaves already, so makes it suitable. This particular tree, why I picked this particular tree, it has a reasonably thick trunk. It's not super thick, but it's nice and thick. It's got a bit of taper. You can see the trunk gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and it's on an angle. Being on an angle like that means that it has branches coming off with some nice angular movement. So moving forward, we're probably going to cut a lot of this top stuff off and promote one of these here as our new leader, and that will give us that nice curved trunk that a lot of people are chasing in their bonsai. But initially, what I'm going to do, I'm going to repot this into a bonsai training pot, probably just in a potting mix for now. These things don't mind being wet, and the bonsai training pot will just give it a wider pot, which will let the roots grow out wider in the direction that we want to. But I'm going to have a little bit of a dig around on the surface just to see what we've got under the surface as far as the trunk goes, and then we'll make some decisions then about the front of our tree, and then we can decide which branches that we want to remove. So out of the pot, like I said, it's probably a bit root bound. I probably should have done this 2 months ago. Have a look at that. Should be ashamed of myself. But onward and upward. Take a bit of the soil off. Oh, the roots are going to be thick on this one. Depending on your climate, other trees that I would have chosen here, like bald cypress, are a good one. They grow really well and don't mind sitting in a bit of water, and they'll get nice and thick in the trunk nice and quick. They are deciduous, so they don't grow all year round. Melaleucas are pretty trouble free. They love water too. Man, that is thick. And I really should have done this 2 months ago. But really, whatever grows really well in your area. So generally a native species, because they're adapted to your climate. Wow. Just trying to see where some of the main roots are. See if the trunk does get fatter underneath the surface. Which is not going to be easy today. Wow. Don't be afraid to be a little bit rough. Try not to break stuff if you don't have to, but and this thing is so root bound that you don't really have a choice, unfortunately. There's quite a lot of large roots in there. Maybe we'll keep them, maybe we won't. Until we get into it, we really don't know. Another good thing about callistemons is you can remove probably 90% of their roots and they will still grow back. So they're a very vigorous grower. It's so full of fibrous roots, I can't even get into that. Tell me again, I should have done this 2 months ago. When these trees are in round pots like this and they get overgrown, the roots go round in circles. I don't know if you can really see on the video, but there's this really thick root running acrossways. That's never going to look good on a bonsai. You want your roots radiating outwards from the trunk. So I can pretty safely take a punt and say that that is never going to be part of our bonsai tree. So we can remove stuff like that. That root there, see how it's radiating directly out from the trunk? Maybe we could use that. There's no guarantee. We may want to put our root base down lower depending on what's underneath here. That's what we need to dig and find out. But we can make some selections which will help thin things out and make things a bit easier. I don't use my good branch cutters for cutting in the roots. I've got a cheap second set that I use for cutting in the dirt because the dirt will damage your blades pretty quick. Just looking at these roots up here, I don't think they're actually attached to the trunk up that high, they're down lower. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say that we don't need them. I'm going to remove them. Normally you would try and expose them so you could see exactly what you're removing and make sure that you didn't want them, but this tree is so overgrown that it needs some drastic work. And don't worry, I will come back and update you on this tree. I'm pretty confident that it will survive, no problem at all. I do have a tendency to be a little bit rough with my trees, but so far I haven't done too bad with them. Touch wood. Don't procrastinate, people. If you need to do work on your trees, get in and do it. Don't be like me. This is terrible. Absolutely terrible. If by some chance I end up actually bare rooting this tree in an attempt to sort anything out, I'll probably put it into a bonsai mix. The original plan was just to put it in a potting mix because I had no intention of bare rooting the tree. But the more we dig, the more it looks like we're going to have to take more and more and more. And depending on how far we go with it, depends on whether we will, what soil we'll use in the end. Because ultimately we do need it in that bonsai mix, but it's not really critical at this point in time. For me, bonsai mix is a little bit easier to look after. I think it handles automatic waterers and stuff like that a little bit better. It doesn't get waterlogged as easy. It doesn't go hydrophobic as easy, so you don't have to be quite spot on with your watering regime. But if you're going to water them every day and keep an eye on them, potting mix is fine. Bonsai mix will help to promote all these fine roots a lot more than a potting mix will. Potting mix, you tend to end up with a lot of these big thick roots which don't do a hell of a lot for the tree. A lot of your feeder roots are all these little thin roots, little growing tips on them. So that's ultimately what we want to promote, because we're only going to give the tree a very small area to live in, or very small volume to live in. So we don't want that volume taken up with a whole heap of massive thick roots if we can help it. I think we're just going to have to go all in, I think, on this one. Yeah, it's a bit out of control. And not really what I wanted for a how to get started video. But that'll teach me for leaving it 3 months and not doing anything with it. Will I learn? Probably not. But anyway. Holy wow. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start working my way down the trunk, cutting off roots until I find a point where the trunk starts to get narrower, because we don't want that above soil level. So if we can find that the trunk gets wider underneath the soil surface here, we'll lift the tree up and that can stay above the soil, because that's a desirable trait. The trunk does sort of widen out a little bit down here, so we're probably on the right track. Remove any of these ones that are wrapping around, they're never going to do you any good long term. Another root there that's sort of just growing up against the trunk of the tree. Sort of got to envisage what the tree is going to look like when it's finished to a degree. And just sort of slowly push it in the direction that you want it to go. That's probably, I don't know if we'd want to go any further than that. Don't know if it's really apparent on camera, but it's just starting to taper in a little bit on the sides, probably because there's been roots wrapped around there. It'll probably fill out okay, but if we can now use that as our soil level, so we've probably gained maybe an inch of trunk above the soil level, which is always good. Everyone loves an extra inch, don't they? And we need to now fit it into our bonsai pot. That's not going to go. So for this particular type of tree, another broken branch, I would have no qualms whatsoever in getting a handsaw and just cutting off wherever I need to, just to get it down into that soil level where we want it. And then we can maybe have a look at taking a bit more soil out and whether we want to put it in a bonsai mix or not. I'll grab a handsaw. So probably want to take about 4 inches or so off the end of that. We'll go about there and see what it looks like. It's probably close. It'll sit down a bit lower once we take a bit more soil out. See, we've come this far, we probably may as well just bare root it, put it straight into a bonsai mix. And you'll see there's a big major root here, that's sort of your taproot. If we can lift that up a bit and cut some of that off, that'd be a bonus as well while we're going. Let's try and loosen up whatever dirt we can. Another option, if you want, is to take this outside, hit it with the hose all the dirt out, and just see what you can see. Try and leave as much of the fibrous roots as you can. Just going to chew my way up on that taproot, see if we can shorten him up a bit. They don't really serve any purpose in a bonsai. In a wild tree, they may help anchor the tree and get some roots down in deep into the soil for water and stuff when it's dry, but in a bonsai, they serve no purpose. They are just a hindrance, and the earlier we get rid of them, the better, and promote just fine roots. That's all we want, just feeder roots. So even a lot of these big thick ones that don't have many feeder roots on them can go. It's not attached to anything. And again, you have to be a little bit careful and do a bit of research on what your particular species of tree likes. Some trees like to be root pruned in certain seasons. Some are a bit touchy with roots. That's why I lean towards something like a callistemon. They're just super hardy when it comes to this sort of thing. And that's good for someone like me that's not very careful. And if you're honest with yourself, you may be much the same. And you may be better off finding a tree like this that grows really well in your climate. It just makes it easy. I don't know that we're going to get it much more than that. It's still got a fair bit of a root system. It's not a huge amount of soil left in that. So we might use a bonsai mix, which will promote some good fine roots. And then in future times we can actually you can cut wedges out as you go to repot stuff in the future. You can cut a wedge out, leave most of this root system, maybe cut a quarter of the roots out, and let it just regrow fine roots in there that are a bit easier to manage. Because it is still a bit of a mess in here, but I don't want to go too hard on it. So as for a front, it's going to be either that side or that side. It's the only sides that you will see that angular movement, which is a desirable feature. I don't know that either side has anything going for it over the other. I think depending on what height we're going to cut it off at, I think it might look good as a little bit taller tree, this one. In which case I'd probably tend to cut it off here, use this side as the front. That gives us a nice section of trunk here. This one's already well advanced. We could just leave that grow then, and all these shoots would come out off this branch, and then we could make a selection up here somewhere, maybe shoot the trunk back that way. And when we cut this off here, I know with callistemons, they'll tend to shoot a lot out around that wound area. So we can then develop a branch out that side. And we could do like a Japanese style with it, or we can just let stuff grow upwards and out here and do it into a more Australian native style. See, if we cut it off up here and use this as the front, the branch looks a bit funny growing out the back like that. So I think what we'll do, and it's very simple, we'll just cut that off. That will be our change in direction. We'll tidy that up a little bit, just to angle that cut towards the back a little bit, I'll use these concave branch cutters and just trim away at it a little. Just to hide that scar a little bit. And this will shoot out from around here, I reckon, and we'll be able to select the branch. To make the best use of this trunk, we don't want any of this stuff. We just want that as a trunk, and our first branch will be up here. We can leave these on for now. These growing out of here will help to fatten up the trunk, which will give you more taper in the trunk, which is desirable. What we don't want is to let these get too big, because when we cut these off, we're going to be left with a scar. Bigger the scar, the longer it takes to heal. So I will tend to take that off. This one here, sort of a little bit at the back of the tree, so we could probably afford to let that get a little bit bigger and help with the overall size of the tree, and then we can cut it off without having too much of a scar. This back one I think is dead, so it can go. This one on the front, it's only tiny. Do we want it? Probably not. If we remove them when they're small, you won't even have a scar to see. This one, similar thing, eh? It's on the back. We want to leave it? No, I'll probably take that one. It's already starting to bulge out a little bit where that joint is. Probably don't want it to bulge out any more than that. So we'll try and cut it off fairly flush. We do have, so these knob cutters will cut a concave hole, which should heal over better. Sort of hollows the cut out a little bit more, which will help it heal up. Probably plant it on a bit of an angle. We could even increase that, but I think that's okay. I reckon we'll plant it in the pot like that, and we'll wait and see what shoots off out of here. And that will be the first step to growing our bonsai. Do we want to wire it in? Probably. I'll just use some thin aluminium wire, and we'll just fit some tie wires to this training pot, just to make sure the tree doesn't move around too much. Just helps it settle in. Rightio, here we have our bonsai mix. This is just a homemade bonsai mix. I just buy bags of scoria, like just a lava rock. There's zeolite, there's perlite, vermiculite, and I add a little bit of potting mix just to give it a little bit of organic matter. I don't know, I can't quite get away from using a bit of organic matter. But you can make your mix up however you like. Main thing is that it really free drains. Just settle it down. What do we reckon? Some of these roots are going to look a little bit funky for a while. But the good thing is, we can always work on stuff. Come back and revisit it in 6 or 12 months' time, pull it out of the pot and improve those roots a little bit. We use a chopstick to just get our soil mix down in amongst the roots. Put our chopstick in, circular motion just helps that soil mix just fall into all the gaps. Just tie that in. Let's run a wire over each side of the root base. and then we'll go across the other way as well. And that should just help to lock it in. Doesn't have to be tied in super tight, you just want it to help locate it in the pot. And I wouldn't leave these wires on for very long. 6 weeks maybe, depending on how quick your trees grow. And then just break them off, snip them off, whatever you need to do. If you use fairly thin wires, the tree probably will break them off themselves as the tree grows, but just to minimise any risk of wire scars anywhere you don't want them, just make sure you got the soil mix all in everywhere you can. And that's pretty much it for where we would start. We don't need to do a huge amount more. We can trim a few dead branches off if we wish. I would tend to leave most of the foliage as it is, let the tree recover. The next thing we would do is when it has a lot of growth on it again, maybe 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it takes, we can come back and we can do some more styling decisions. We would leave the roots alone, do some more styling decisions with the branches. Eventually we may stand this up straighter in the pot. The instinct for the tree is going to be to grow upwards. So I'd like to keep this branch growing upwards. If we stood it up now, that branch would probably try and straighten up and take a fair bit of that curve out. And we like to have a bit of curve in our trunk, just for a little bit of interest. So this is where I would choose to start, and it's where I really have started. Just with nursery trees that show a little bit of interest, and yeah, just really worked on them from there. I'm only just starting to come to the point now where I have trees that actually are nice to look at. But yeah, that's how simple it is to start, and it's easier if you don't leave the damn things in a pot for 3 months getting root bound. Remember that one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.